Hello, everyone. Today, we will discuss the Battle of Pearl Harbor. Following the First World War, Japan was considered one of the victorious and relatively developed global powers. However, massive socioeconomic upheavals, both domestically and globally, plunged Japan into a deep crisis. To escape this crisis, and compounded by a severe shortage of natural resources, raw materials, and consumer markets, Japan militarized its state apparatus under a fascist model. It began expanding and invading resource-rich neighboring nations. This aggressive expansion continued when Japan joined the Axis alliance and entered the Second World War. This expansion did not sit well with the United States. Consequently, America imposed embargoes on Japan, particularly targeting oil, a vital lifeblood for Japanese industries that heavily relied on petroleum products imported from the United States. As a result, tensions between the United States and Japan reached a boiling point. This was also when Japan's War Cabinet finalized a plan to launch a preemptive strike against the United States as a deterrent and retaliation. The United States had also prepared for this potential confrontation by redeploying its Pacific Fleet to base at the Hawaiian Islands, establishing a remote defensive bridgehead supported by strong military forces stationed in the Philippines. Japan secretly and meticulously prepared for this attack. They were actively seeking oil and rubber resources in Southeast Asia, specifically in Malaya and the East Indies. Consequently, Japan wanted to prevent the United States from interfering with their plans. To achieve this, Japan plotted a preemptive strike against the United States Pacific Fleet stationed in Hawaii. The United States also anticipated that Japan would attack their forces, but they expected the strike to occur in the Philippines rather than imagining a surprise raid on Hawaii. They reasoned that a force in the Philippines could easily sever the oil transportation routes to Japan. It was precisely this miscalculation that laid the groundwork for the disaster at Pearl Harbor, leaving it vulnerable to a sudden Japanese attack without any prior declaration of war. On the morning of Sunday, December 7th, 1941, President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the President of the United States at the time, famously stated that it was a date which will live in infamy. The attacking Japanese fleet comprised 6 aircraft carriers carrying approximately 350 aircraft of various types, escorted by battleships, heavy cruisers, and destroyers. Additionally, submarines, transport ships, and supply vessels accompanied the strike force. The primary Japanese strike force consisted of 350 aircraft. This number included 78 Mitsubishi A6M Type 11 fighter aircraft, commonly known as the Zero, 129 Aichi D-3A Type 99 dive bombers, known as the VAL, which were capable of carrying a 250-kilogram bomb under the fuselage and 2 60-kilogram bombs under the wings, and 143 Nakajima B-5N Type 97 torpedo bombers, known as the Kate, capable of carrying either a single torpedo or an 800-kilogram bomb. Regarding the American fleet stationed in Hawaii, the Pacific Fleet was considered the most powerful fleet in the world at that time. This fleet consisted of approximately 170 vessels of various types. Notable components included a battleship force of 8 ships, a destroyer force of 32 ships, along with numerous submarines and other auxiliary vessels. Stationed in Hawaii were also 43,000 soldiers and officers, 5 airfields, and approximately 400 military aircraft of various types across the islands. With such a formidable force, the Americans had plenty of reason to be confident that Japan would not dare attack Pearl Harbor, the very heart of the Pacific Fleet. Thus, preparations were complete, and a historic battle was about to unfold. On November 26, 1941, the Japanese fleet departed northern Japan, heading toward the northwest of Hawaii. To maintain absolute secrecy, the fleet was ordered to sink any neutral vessels it encountered along the way. If they encountered any American ships, they were instructed to turn back. Fortunately for them, the Japanese convoy did not cross paths with any vessels during the entire journey. By December 6, 1941, the fleet had advanced close to the north of the Hawaiian Islands. In the early morning hours of December 7, 1941, the Japanese fleet transitioned from cruising formation to battle formation. At 3:30 in the morning, the Japanese fleet was ready for combat. By 5:30 in the morning, 4 reconnaissance aircraft took off to scout the Hawaiian Islands. At exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, the first wave of attack was prepared, consisting of 189 aircraft launched from 6 aircraft carriers. However, 6 aircraft experienced technical malfunctions. This first attack wave was divided into 3 groups. The first group was tasked with destroying battleships and any aircraft carriers if present. This group consisted of 50 Kate bombers equipped with 800-kilogram armor-piercing bombs, organized into 4 squadrons, and 40 other Kate bombers equipped with torpedoes, also organized into 4 squadrons. The second group targeted the airfields on Ford Island and Wheeler Air Force Base. This group comprised 54 Val dive bombers equipped with 250-kilogram general-purpose bombs. The third group aimed to destroy aircraft at the airfields, consisting of 45 Zero-fighter aircraft to establish air superiority and strafe ground targets. At exactly 6:20 in the morning, 183 aircraft roared into the sky, forming a T-shape and flying toward the Hawaiian Islands. By 7:35 in the morning, the 4 reconnaissance aircraft reported back that the Pacific Fleet was concentrated at Pearl Harbor. At Pearl Harbor, Sunday morning was peaceful. Most sailors, officers, soldiers, and staff were still asleep in their warm beds, while a few early risers went about their routines, completely unaware that in just a few minutes, this peaceful sky would be filled with Japanese aircraft. As the Japanese planes approached, an American radar station detected the incoming group, but they mistakenly assumed they were American aircraft. At 7:40 in the morning, all 8 battleships were clearly visible to the Japanese pilots. The USS Oklahoma was alongside the USS Maryland, followed by the USS West Virginia next to the USS Tennessee. The USS Arizona was paired with the repair ship USS Vestal, while the USS Nevada stood at the end of the line, and the USS California led the formation slightly ahead of the rest. A short distance away sat the fleet's flagship, the USS Pennsylvania, escorted by 2 destroyers. There were also many other cruisers and destroyers, but not a single aircraft carrier was present. The battle commenced at 7:48 in the morning when the code to 2-2 was transmitted along with a black signal flare. At exactly 7:53 in the morning, before the first bomb even fell on Pearl Harbor, the code Tora 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 was transmitted by the strike commander, indicating that the attack had achieved complete surprise. The famous dispatch, "Air raid on Pearl Harbor. This is no drill," was sent to the American command. Yet, a portion of the American officers and soldiers did not immediately react to the Japanese attack before the first torpedoes were dropped, thinking that some fireworks had gone off. This occurred at 7:55 in the morning. Looking down from above, Several Japanese pilots mistook the USS Utah for an aircraft carrier because it was docked alone on the opposite side of Ford Island and featured a flat deck. Soon after, waves of Japanese aircraft dove to attack this completely defenseless target. The USS Utah, originally a battleship with 33 years of service at sea, had all of its weapons removed to serve as a target ship for training. By 8:12 in the morning, the USS Utah had capsized. Alongside it, the light cruiser USS Raleigh and the seaplane tender USS Curtis were hit by torpedoes and heavily damaged. At exactly 7:57 in the morning, Japanese aircraft circled south of the island, flying up along the line. They targeted the light cruiser USS Helena, which was shielded by the mine layer USS Oglala. But a torpedo passed underneath the mine layer and struck the Helena, effectively knocking both the Helena and its adjacent companion, the Oglala, out of action. Almost simultaneously, at 7:57 in the morning, torpedo planes, attacking from the southeast, flew perpendicular to the line of capital ships. The two battleships, the USS Oklahoma and the USS West Virginia, were the first to be struck by torpedoes, followed by the USS California. The torpedo planes continuously launched devastating torpedo strikes that shook the entire harbor. Despite the surprise attack, alerted sailors on the ships quickly manned their battle stations to return fire against the Japanese aircraft, inflicting some losses on the enemy. The USS California was targeted heavily by Japanese planes, taking multiple torpedo hits. The USS Nevada rapidly became a new target for the attackers, taking a torpedo but sustaining only light damage initially. After a short time, the USS Oklahoma capsized, while the remaining ships began to sink or suffered severe damage. With that, the massive onslaught by the torpedo bombers was over. The battleships on the outer edge of the moored formation were knocked out of the fight and began to sink. The battleships shielded on the inside could not be effectively reached by torpedoes. Thus, it was time for the bombers to strike with 250-kilogram and 800-kilogram bombs. The battleships USS Arizona, USS Tennessee, and USS Maryland were the primary targets. All of them were hit by Japanese bombs and burst into flames. The USS Arizona was struck by a bomb that penetrated its smokestack down into the ammunition magazine, causing the ship to explode, split in two, and sink immediately, taking almost her entire crew with her. The USS Nevada, which had not suffered extensive damage, quickly opened fire to engage the Japanese planes. There was also a small Japanese force involved in the battle consisting of 5 midget submarines. Among these 5, some managed to slip into Pearl Harbor, while others were detected and sunk before the battle even began. Notably, one Japanese midget submarine fired its 2 torpedoes at the USS Curtis and the destroyer USS Monaghan, but both missed. It was subsequently spotted and sunk by the Monaghan. Another midget submarine ran aground, and 1 sailor was captured, becoming the first Japanese prisoner of war in the Pacific theater. The other midget submarines were likely lost somewhere within the Pearl Harbor area. At exactly 7:15 in the morning, the aircraft of the second attack wave began taking off, comprising 171 planes, 54 B-5 bombers, 81 D-3A bombers, and 36 A-6M fighters. 4 aircraft were unable to take off due to technical difficulties. At approximately 8:54 in the morning, the second wave began its assault. The objective of this second wave was to finish off the targets that had not been destroyed during the first wave. The damaged battleship USS Nevada tried to maneuver to evade the hail of bombs from the dive bombers while firing back fiercely. But after a short while, it was struck by multiple bombs and had to be run aground. Thus, out of the 8 battleships, 7 had been heavily attacked. Only the flagship USS Pennsylvania, which was dry docked in a protected slipway, remained largely out of reach. That was also why it was difficult for torpedoes to strike her during the first wave. However, alongside her were 2 escorting destroyers, and many bombs were dropped on them, destroying both destroyers, while the Pennsylvania suffered only minor damage. Japanese bombers swept over every valuable target they could spot, and the destroyer USS Shaw was no exception. The Shaw had luckily escaped the torpedoes of the midget submarines, but it was bombed by aircraft, and its forward magazine exploded shortly afterward. Thus, the battle gradually drew to a close after various smaller bombing raids. Japan's primary objective was to target and destroy the battleships, as they were the pride of any naval force. And striking them was also intended as a psychological blow to the enemy. In addition, the Japanese forces attacked other high-value warships, airfields, and the aircraft stationed on them. The bombers and fighters carried out airstrikes that damaged or destroyed hundreds of American planes, caught completely by surprise. American aircraft of all types, neatly lined up side by side in hangars or on runways, became easy targets for the Japanese pilots. The vast majority of the American aircraft were destroyed on the ground, and only a very small number managed to take off to fight back. Many anti-aircraft gun crews were either eliminated or lacked ammunition because the armories were locked, rendering their defense attempts ineffective. At this moment, 2 groups of American aircraft arrived, one group of B-17 Flying Fortresses flying in from the mainland, and another group of carrier-based aircraft returning from the west of the islands. They witnessed the smoke and fire over Pearl Harbor, but assumed it was just the U.S. Navy conducting exercises. They only realized the truth when Japanese planes suddenly dove toward them and opened fire. The American formation fell into disarray, and several planes were shot down. To make matters worse, some American aircraft were at risk of being shot down by friendly fire from ground-based anti-aircraft units. In the confusion, the ground forces could not distinguish friend from foe, and since they could not identify the aircraft types, they assumed they were enemy planes disguised to deceive them. It was a tragic irony for the American aircraft arriving from elsewhere during those chaotic moments. Nevertheless, some American planes managed to shoot down 11 Japanese aircraft. Most notably, pilots George Welch and Kenneth Taylor achieved a combined total of 7 downed planes. The city of Honolulu was struck by only a single stray Japanese bomb, while 40 other explosions in the city were actually caused by American anti-aircraft fire, resulting in 68 civilian deaths and injuries. At exactly 9:45 in the morning, the commander ordered all Japanese aircraft to return to the fleet, concluding the attack. Some staff officers proposed launching a third wave to strike the fuel depots, repair facilities, and dry docks at Pearl Harbor. However, the commander of the operation, Admiral Nagumo, weighed the potential risks and losses, considering that they could be counterattacked by American aircraft from Pearl Harbor or the mainland, alongside the logistical challenges of resupplying the Japanese fleet. Consequently, the Japanese fleet quietly turned around and sailed back to Japan. The failure to attack these vital American infrastructure installations allowed the United States to quickly rebuild the strength of its Pacific fleet. Several battleships and other vessels were salvaged, repaired, and returned to service. From then on, the United States was able to quickly prepare for a counteroffensive against Japan. The outcome of the raid was devastating. The attack resulted in the deaths of 2,335 Americans, 68 of whom were civilians. Most of these civilian casualties occurred when American anti-aircraft shells failed to detonate in the air and crashed down into residential areas. An additional 1,139 individuals were injured. Most of those killed were aboard the destroyed ships, with many tragically burning to death while swimming in a sea covered in burning oil. 18 vessels were sunk or heavily damaged, including 4 battleships that were completely sunk. Furthermore, 188 aircraft were destroyed, and 159 were damaged. The Japanese attack on the barracks also caused additional casualties. On the Japanese side, 55 pilots and 9 midget submariners were killed, and 1 was captured as a prisoner of war. Out of the aircraft that participated in the attack, 29 were lost during the battle, and 74 others were damaged by anti-aircraft fire from the ground. In conclusion, the Battle of Pearl Harbor serves as a stark lesson on the dangers of complacency and underestimating the enemy in military operations. It represents the ultimate consequence of lax defense and failing to envision the enemy's offensive capabilities, which forced the Americans to pay a heavy price, a lesson that remains fully relevant 75 years later. Japan successfully launched a preemptive strike on the United States and sidelined the Pacific Fleet for a considerable period. This success created the conditions for Japan to rapidly expand across the Pacific and Indian Oceans. However, Japan's actions directly dealt a massive blow that awakened the sleeping giant of the United States and dragged it into the Second World War. You have just finished watching the video. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a comment below on what you think about this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and share. And do not forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you will not miss any of our next interesting uploads.